The Galactic Coalition had stood for 12,000 years. It was a union of 847 different species from across the known universe. They had built great cities on 1,000,000 worlds. They had created wonders that would make ancient gods weep with jealousy. They had ended wars, cured diseases, and mapped the stars themselves. And now, they were running away. Ambassador Kethvora stood at the massive window of the Coalition Senate building on the capital world of Nexus Prime. His tall, slender body was covered in scales that shifted color with his emotions. Right now, they were a deep, fearful purple. Behind him, the great chamber was filled with chaos. Representatives from hundreds of species shouted over each other. Some were crying, others were already leaving, rushing to their ships. "How long do we have?" asked a trembling voice beside him. Kethvora turned to see Ambassador Iril, a small furry creature from the Mikari system. Her large eyes were wet with tears. "The frontier worlds fell in 3 days." Kethvora replied. His voice was hollow. 17 billion dead, 3 entire species wiped out, gone, as if they never existed. And the enemy? What do we know about them? Kethvora looked back at the window. In the distance, he could see ships already lifting off. The evacuation had begun before the Senate had even voted. "We call them the Silence," he said. "They came from somewhere beyond our galaxy, from the empty void between the stars. They are machines, I think, or perhaps living things that became machines. No one knows for certain because everyone who gets close enough to study them dies. What do they want? Memories." The word hung in the air like poison. They consume memories. When they kill a person, they take everything that person ever knew, ever felt, ever loved. And when they finish with a world, that world is erased from history. The frontier species. I knew their names yesterday. Now I cannot remember them. Their art, their music, their languages, all gone, as if they were never born. Iril made a small sound of horror. "That is not possible. I watched the recordings before they too were erased. I saw cities vanish. I saw people screaming as their own children. Forgot them. The Silence does not just kill bodies. It kills souls." The great doors of the Senate chamber burst open. High Chancellor Morvath entered, his massive form supported by 6 mechanical legs. He was ancient, the oldest living member of the Coalition, and he had seen 3 wars in his long life. But Kethvora had never seen him look so afraid. "The vote is complete," Morvath announced. His voice echoed through the chamber, silencing the chaos. "Protocol Omega is now in effect. All Coalition species are ordered to evacuate to the Andromeda Corridor. The combined fleet will provide cover for civilian transports. This is not a drill. This is not a temporary measure. We are leaving, and we are not coming back." The chamber erupted in fresh chaos. Species that had been enemies for centuries now embraced each other in shared terror. Others fought to reach the exits first. Kethvora watched it all with numb acceptance. This was the end of everything they had built, the end of civilization itself. Ambassador Kethvora. He turned at the sound of his name. A human woman was walking toward him through the crowd. She was small by Coalition standards, barely reaching his chest. Her hair was gray and cut short. Her uniform was simple and practical. She moved like a soldier, each step precise and purposeful. "Admiral Helena Vance," she introduced herself. "United Nations Space Command." Kethvora tried to remember what he knew about humans. They were young, very young by galactic standards. Their species had only discovered space travel about 300 years ago. They had joined the Coalition just 50 years past. Most species considered them little more than clever children, still learning to walk among the stars. "Admiral," he greeted her politely. "You should be evacuating with the others. The human transport ships are gathering in Sector 7. We are not evacuating." Kethvora blinked. "I am sorry. I do not think I understood you correctly." "You understood me perfectly. Humanity is not running. We are staying to fight." For a long moment, Kethvora could not speak. He looked at the small human woman as if she had just announced that she planned to extinguish a star by spitting on it. "Admiral Vance," he said slowly, choosing his words with great care. "I do not think you understand what you are saying. The Silence has destroyed civilizations that were building starships when your ancestors were still living in caves. They have consumed species that were ancient when the first single-celled life appeared on your world. You have 47 military vessels. The Silence has tens of thousands. This is not a battle you can win. This is not a battle anyone can win. I know. Then why would you stay? Why would you throw away your entire species for nothing? Admiral Vance smiled. It was a strange expression, one that Kethvora's translator could not fully interpret. There was sadness in it, yes, but also something else. Something hard and bright and utterly unbreakable. Because someone has to, she said. She turned and began walking toward the exit. Kethvora followed her, his long legs easily keeping pace with her shorter stride. Admiral, please, think about what you are doing. Your species is young. You have so much potential. If you flee now, you can rebuild. You can grow. In a few thousand years, you might be strong enough to face the Silence. But if you stay and fight, you will die. All of you. Every human that has ever existed will be erased from the universe. Your art, your music, your stories, gone forever. Is that really what you want? Vance stopped walking. She turned to face him, and Kethvora saw something in her eyes that he did not understand. It was not fear. It was not madness. It was something he had never seen in any species before. Let me tell you something about humans, she said. About 100,000 years ago, my ancestors were living in caves in a place called Africa. They had no technology, no weapons except rocks and sticks. And they were dying. A massive volcano erupted, and the climate changed. Food became scarce. Our population dropped to maybe 10,000 individuals. 10,000 humans in the entire world. We should have gone extinct, but you did not. No, we did not. And do you know why? Because those 10,000 people refused to give up. They looked at a dying world, and instead of accepting death, they got angry. They spread across the planet. They crossed frozen wastelands and burning deserts. They built boats and crossed oceans. They faced predators bigger and stronger than themselves and killed them with pointy sticks. They were cold, hungry, and outnumbered, and they won anyway. Kethvora shook his head. That was different. You were fighting nature, not an enemy that can think and adapt. Was it different? We have been fighting extinction since the day we climbed down from the trees. Ice ages, plagues, famines, wars. We have killed each other by the billions. We have burned our own cities and poisoned our own air. We have come within minutes of destroying ourselves with nuclear weapons. And every single time, we survived. Not because we were the strongest or the smartest, but because we are too stubborn to die. She started walking again, and again Kethvora followed. The Silence expects us to run, Vance continued. Every species they have ever encountered has run. That is the logical thing to do. The smart thing. But humans are not always logical, Ambassador. Sometimes we are just mean. And right now, I am very, very mean. They reached the exit. Outside, the sky was filled with ships. Thousands of vessels of every size and shape were rising toward the stars, carrying billions of refugees toward safety. It was the greatest exodus in galactic history, and one small group of ships was moving in the opposite direction. Those are our warships, Vance said, pointing at the fleet of human vessels. 47 capital ships, 112 support craft, maybe 1 million soldiers in total, against an enemy that has conquered galaxies. It is suicide. Maybe. Probably. But here is the thing about humans, Ambassador. We are not afraid of suicide missions. Our history is full of them. 300 Spartans holding a mountain pass against 1 million soldiers. A few hundred defenders holding a fort in Texas against thousands. Young men climbing out of trenches to charge machine guns. We know how to die fighting. It is one of the things we are best at. Kethvora felt something strange stirring in his chest. He did not recognize it at first. It had been so long since any species had made him feel this way. It was hope. Tiny and fragile, but real. You truly believe you can win? Vance laughed. It was a bitter sound. No, I do not think we can win. But I think we can hurt them. I think we can make them bleed. And I think that if we are going to die anyway, we might as well die screaming curses and throwing punches. And your people? Your civilians? Your children? They feel the same way. Vance's voice softened slightly. I spoke to the president before I came here. She is going to address the entire planet in a few hours. She is going to tell them the truth. All of it. The enemy, the odds, the almost certain death that is coming. And then she is going to ask them to fight anyway. And you think they will? I know they will. Because that is who we are. We are the species that runs toward danger instead of away from it. We are the species that builds hospitals in war zones and rescues strangers from burning buildings. We are the species that looks at the impossible and says, "Hold my beer." Kethvora did not understand the last reference, but he understood the meaning behind it. "You are insane," he said quietly. "Probably," Vance agreed. "But we are also humanity, and humanity does not go quietly." She reached out and took his hand. Her grip was warm and surprisingly strong. "Go, Ambassador. Take your people and run. Find a safe place in another galaxy. Build new cities and write new songs. And remember us. That is all I ask. When the history books are written, remember that there was a species called humanity. Remember that when the darkness came, we stood against it. Remember that we did not run." She released his hand and walked toward her waiting shuttle. Kethvora watched her go, his scales shifting through colors he could not control. "Admiral," he called out. She stopped and looked back. "Why?" he asked. "I still do not understand. Why throw away everything for a fight you cannot win?" Vance smiled that strange smile again. "Because my grandmother survived a concentration camp. My grandfather lost his legs in a war and still raised 4 children. My mother was a refugee who walked 1,000 miles with nothing but the clothes on her back. I come from a long line of stubborn, angry people who refused to die when they were supposed to. If I ran now, I would be spitting on their graves. But you will die. Everyone dies, Ambassador. The only question is whether you die standing up or lying down." She paused. "Besides, there is one thing the silence has never faced before." "What is that?" "A species with nothing to lose and everything to prove." Her eyes gleamed with something fierce. "We have been fighting for our survival since before we could write. We have trained for extinction our entire history. The silence thinks it is coming to conquer another easy prey. It is wrong. It is walking into the largest trap in the history of the universe." "A trap?" "The trap is us. We are the species that invented war. Not the clean, civilized war that the Coalition practices. The ugly, brutal, no-rules kind of war. The kind where you burn your own cities rather than let the enemy have them. The kind where grandmothers pick up rifles and children throw grenades. The kind where there is no surrender, no negotiation, no mercy." She climbed into her shuttle. Before the door closed, she looked back one last time. "Tell the Coalition something for me. Tell them that we are going to buy them time. Months, maybe years, if we are lucky. Use that time wisely. Build defenses. Develop new weapons. And maybe, just maybe, think about coming back to help." The door closed. The shuttle lifted off. Kethvora watched it fly toward the gathering human fleet, and he felt something break inside him. He had been running his entire life. His species had been running for thousands of years. They had always believed that survival was the highest goal, that living to fight another day was better than dying today. But watching that small human shuttle fly toward certain death, he suddenly was not sure anymore. He turned and walked back into the Senate building. The chamber was almost empty now. Only a few stragglers remained, packing the last of their belongings. "Ambassador!" One of his aides rushed toward him. "The evacuation shuttle is waiting. We need to go now." Kethvora did not answer. He walked to his desk and began pulling up files. Historical records, military data, everything the Coalition had ever collected about the silence. "Ambassador, what are you doing?" "There is no time. I am copying these files," Kethvora said calmly. "Everything we know about the enemy. I am going to send them to the human fleet." "Why?" "They are already dead. They just do not know it yet." Kethvora thought about Admiral Vance, about her grandmother who survived the concentration camp, about her grandfather who lost his legs and kept fighting, about all those millions of humans flying toward death with their eyes open and their hearts on fire. "Maybe they are dead," he said, "but they deserve every advantage we can give them. They are doing something none of us had the courage to do. They are standing up." He finished the transfer and finally turned to follow his aide. "And besides," he added quietly, "I have a feeling that the silence is about to learn what it really means to fight a war." Far above them, the human fleet formed into battle formation. 47 ships against the end of the world. It was insane. It was hopeless. It was magnificent. And in her command chair aboard the flagship Defiance, Admiral Helena Vance looked at the stars and smiled. All ships, this is Admiral Vance. The coalition is running, the enemy is coming, and we are all that stands between them and everything we love. She paused. I will not lie to you. Most of us are going to die. Maybe all of us. But I promise you this. They will remember us. Long after the last star burns out, they will tell stories about what humanity did today. They will whisper our names in the dark and wonder how we found the courage. She stood up and raised her voice. So let us show them what we are made of. Let us show them what happens when you back humans into a corner. Let us show them why our ancestors survived ice ages and plagues and wars, not because we were the strongest, not because we were the smartest, but because we were too stubborn to die. A roar went up across the fleet. Soldiers and sailors, scientists and engineers, all of them screaming their defiance at the uncaring stars, and somewhere in the darkness between galaxies, the silence heard something it had never heard before. It heard the sound of prey that refused to run. It did not understand what it was hearing, but it would learn. Oh yes, it would learn. 3 days after the coalition fled, the last of their great ships vanished into the distance. Their engines left trails of light across the sky like tears falling into the void. Billions of beings from hundreds of species ran toward safety, and they did not look back. Earth had never felt so alone. General Marcus Chen stood on the observation deck of the UNS Defiance and watched the final coalition vessel disappear. He was 62 years old, with gray hair and deep lines around his eyes. He had fought in 4 wars during his career, but nothing had prepared him for this. They are gone, said Captain Yuki Tanaka, stepping up beside him. She was young, barely 30, but she had the hard eyes of a veteran. Every single one of them. Can you blame them? Chen replied. The silence has destroyed civilizations older than our entire species. Running was the smart choice. Then why did we not run? Chen turned to look at her. Because running was never really an option for us. Where would we go? We have 47 warships and maybe 1,000 civilian transports. The Andromeda Corridor is 2 million light-years away. We would die of old age before we got halfway there. So, we are fighting because we cannot run? No. Chen shook his head. We are fighting because we are humans. We are fighting because that is what we do. Our history is written in blood, Captain. Every great moment of our civilization was purchased with sacrifice. The soldiers who held the line at Marathon. The defenders of Stalingrad who fought house to house in the frozen ruins. The passengers of Flight 93 who charged the cockpit knowing they would die. We have always been willing to trade our lives for something greater. He turned back to the window. Besides, I have grandchildren. 2 little girls, 5 and 7 years old. They live on a farm in Kansas with their parents. If I run now, the silence will eventually find them. Maybe in 100 years, maybe in 1,000, but it will find them. And if we fight, we buy them time. Time to grow up. Time to have children of their own. Time to develop new technologies, build new defenses, find new allies. He paused. Or maybe we win. Unlikely, I know, but not impossible. Tanaka was silent for a moment. Then she nodded slowly. I have a sister on Mars, she said. She is pregnant. Her husband is a teacher. They are scared, but they are not running either. She told me that if the world is going to end, she wants her child to be born free, even if it is only free for a day. Chen placed a hand on her shoulder. That is why we fight, Captain. Not for victory, for that one extra day. The door behind them opened, and a young officer rushed in. His face was pale and excited. General, Admiral Vance is calling an emergency meeting. All senior staff. She says it is time to discuss the Prometheus protocol. Chen and Tanaka exchanged glances. Prometheus. The word hung in the air like a curse. Tell her we are on our way, Chen said. The meeting room was deep in the heart of the Defiance, protected by meters of armored plating. When Chen and Tanaka arrived, they found Admiral Vance already there, along with a dozen other senior officers. The room was tense and quiet. Thank you all for coming, Vance said. She looked tired. None of them had slept much in the past 3 days. I will get straight to the point. The coalition is gone. The enemy is coming. We have maybe 6 weeks before they reach the outer colonies. That gives us 6 weeks to prepare the biggest surprise in military history. She pressed a button, and a holographic display appeared in the center of the room. It showed a schematic of something massive and terrible. Something that made several officers gasp. "This is the Prometheus Protocol," Vance continued. "Most of you have never heard of it. That was intentional. It was developed in secret over the past 50 years, by a joint effort of every major nation on Earth. It was meant to be our last resort if we ever faced extinction." "What is it?" asked Colonel Rodriguez, a heavy-set man with a thick beard. "Everything," Vance replied. "Every terrible weapon we ever dreamed of but were too civilized to build. Antimatter bombs capable of destroying entire planets. Gravity weapons that can tear ships apart at the molecular level. Biological agents that can dissolve organic matter in seconds. Nanobots designed to eat through any material known to science." "My God," someone whispered. "God has nothing to do with this," Vance said flatly. "This is pure human ingenuity applied to the art of killing. We designed these weapons for ourselves, you know. In case we ever went to war with each other again, we were afraid that the old nuclear arsenals would not be enough next time. So we built something worse. And we are going to use them against the silence? We are going to use everything against the silence. Every weapon, every trick, every dirty tactic we have ever developed." Vance leaned forward. "The Coalition fights clean wars. They have rules and conventions and limits. We do not. We are going to fight the ugliest, dirtiest, most vicious war in the history of the galaxy. And we are going to make the silence regret the day it decided to come for us." General Chen studied the schematics. "How much of this is operational?" "About 60%. The other 40% is still in development. But we are rushing it. Every scientist on Earth is working around the clock." Vance pulled up another display. "We also have the Coalition's old defense platforms. They left them behind when they ran. Thousands of automated weapon systems, just sitting there waiting to be reprogrammed. They left their defenses. They did not think they would need them. They planned to run so far that the silence would never find them." Vance smiled grimly. "Their loss is our gain. Colonel Washington, I want you to take a team and start reprogramming those platforms. Turn them into the deadliest killing machines in the galaxy." "Yes, Admiral." "Captain Tanaka, you are now in charge of our intelligence division. I want to know everything about the silence. How they move, how they communicate, what they are afraid of. Find me weaknesses." "Understood." "General Chen, you have overall command of ground forces. The enemy will eventually land on our worlds. When they do, I want them to find nothing but death waiting for them." Chen nodded. "I have already started planning. Booby traps, ambushes, guerrilla tactics. We are going to make every city a fortress and every street a killing ground." "Good." Vance looked around the room. "Everyone else, I want maximum creativity. I want ideas that would make our ancestors proud and our enemies terrified. Nothing is off the table. Nothing is too extreme. If it might hurt the silence, I want to hear about it." The meeting continued for 3 more hours. Plans were made. Resources were allocated. By the end, every officer in the room had a mission and a purpose. As they filed out, Chen hung back. He caught Vance's arm. "Helena," he said quietly. They had known each other for 20 years. "Are you sure about this? The Prometheus weapons. Once we use them, there is no going back. We will be proving that humanity is exactly as dangerous as the Coalition always feared." Vance looked at him with eyes that held no doubt. "I hope we prove we are more dangerous than they ever imagined," she said. "That is the whole point, Marcus. We need to be so terrible, so relentless, so absolutely merciless, that the silence decides we are not worth the trouble, or at least that we are expensive enough to give it pause. And if we become monsters in the process, then we become monsters. Better a living monster than a dead saint." She paused. "Besides, we have always been monsters. We just pretended otherwise. The silence is about to meet the real humanity. The one that built empires on skulls and wrote poetry about the beauty of war. The one that invented nuclear weapons and then gave them cute nicknames. We are not the peaceful explorers the Coalition thought we were. We are predators wearing the skin of prey." Chen had no response to that, because deep down, he knew she was right. On Earth, President Amara Okonkwo stood in front of cameras and prepared to tell the world the truth. She was 60 years old, with skin like dark chocolate and hair that had gone completely white in the past week. She had been a doctor before she went into politics, and she still remembered the hardest part of medicine, telling patients that they were going to die. Now she had to tell an entire planet. "My fellow humans," she began, her voice steady despite the weight of what she was about to say. "I am speaking to you tonight because you deserve the truth. Not comfortable lies, not false hope. The truth." She took a breath. "An enemy is coming. They are called the Silence, and they have destroyed civilizations older than recorded history. The Galactic Coalition, our allies and partners for the past 50 years, has fled. They believe that fighting is hopeless. They may be right." Across the planet, billions of people watched. Families huddled together in living rooms. Workers gathered around screens in factories. Children looked up from their phones and tablets. "I will not tell you that we can win," Okonkwo continued. "I do not know if we can. Our military leaders believe we can hurt the enemy, slow them down, maybe even make them reconsider their invasion. But victory, true victory, that would require a miracle." She leaned forward, her eyes burning with an intensity that made people lean closer to their screens. "But I will tell you this. We are not running. Not because we are too proud or too stupid to run, but because there is nowhere to run to. Our ships cannot outrun the enemy. Our population cannot hide. If we flee, we die tired. If we stand and fight, we die on our feet. And so we will fight. Every man and woman who can hold a weapon will fight. Every factory will build weapons. Every hospital will prepare for casualties. Every school will teach our children what to do when the enemy comes." She stood up straight, and her voice rose. "They think we are weak because we are young. They are wrong. We are strong because we are young. We still remember what it means to fight for survival. We still have the hunger and the fury that older species have forgotten. We are the species that conquered our own world a dozen times over. We are the species that split the atom and walked on the moon. We are the species that refused to die when every odd was against us. So I say to the Silence, come. Come and see what happens when you threaten our children. Come and see what happens when you back us into a corner. Come and learn why every predator that ever hunted us is now extinct. We are humanity. We are not afraid of you. And we will never, ever surrender." The broadcast ended. For a long moment, the world was silent. Then the silence broke. In cities across the planet, people began to cheer. Not the desperate cheering of denial, but the fierce cheering of defiance. Strangers hugged each other in the streets. Old enemies shook hands. The divisions that had plagued humanity for centuries suddenly seemed small and meaningless. In Moscow, a factory that had been making cars began making tanks. In Tokyo, a robotics company started building combat drones. In New York, a retired Marine walked into a recruitment center and said she wanted to fight again. In Lagos, a grandmother took her grandfather's rifle down from the wall and began teaching her grandchildren how to shoot. In a small town in India, a Hindu temple and a Muslim mosque organized a joint blood drive for the coming wounded. In Brazil, drug cartels and police officers declared a truce and began planning joint defense of their cities. The world was not united because a speech told them to be. The world was united because unity was the only option left. And in that unity, something powerful was born. Admiral Vance watched the response from the Defiance and felt something she had not expected. "Hope. They are ready," she said softly. General Chen nodded. "They have always been ready. We just needed something worth fighting for. The Silence has no idea what it is walking into. No, it does not." Chen smiled, and it was not a kind smile. "It thinks it is coming to harvest another easy meal. Instead, it is about to choke on its food." The days that followed were a blur of activity. Ships were refitted, weapons were manufactured, training programs were accelerated. On Mars, colonists began digging tunnels and bunkers. If the enemy wanted their world, they would have to dig them out room by room. On Europa, the ice mining stations were converted into underwater fortresses. The enemy would find only frozen death on the surface. On Titan, the atmospheric processing plants were rigged with explosives. If the colony fell, the enemy would get nothing but poison. And on Earth, the cradle of humanity, every city became a fortress. Every highway became a potential killing ground. Every home became a bunker. Dr. Sarah Kim worked 18 hours a day in her laboratory, studying the fragments of silence technology that had been recovered from the frontier worlds. She was a xenobiologist, 45 years old, with the tired eyes of someone who had not slept properly in weeks. "They are beautiful," she said one night, looking at a piece of silence biomatter under her microscope. In a terrible way. They are like nothing we have ever seen, half machine, half living tissue. They do not reproduce like normal life. They grow from consumed matter, incorporating the genetic material of their victims. Is there a weakness? Asked her assistant, a young man named James. Maybe. Their consciousness is distributed. It is not in one brain but spread across their entire network. If we could disrupt that network. She shook her head, but I do not know how. Not yet. Keep working, James said. You will figure it out. How can you be so sure? Because you are human. And humans always figure it out. Dr. Kim laughed tiredly. I hope you are right. I am. Now get some sleep. You cannot save the world if you die of exhaustion. She did not sleep, of course. None of them did. There was too much work and too little time. But as the days passed and the preparations continued, something strange happened. The fear began to fade. Not because the danger had lessened, but because purpose had replaced paralysis. People who had felt helpless now had tasks. People who had felt alone now had community. People who had felt like victims now felt like warriors. And in the darkness between stars, the silence continued its approach. It had no fear, for it had never known defeat. It had no doubt, for it had never been surprised. It would learn. In 6 weeks, it would reach the outer colonies. In 6 weeks, it would discover what happened when it tried to consume a species that would rather burn than surrender. In 6 weeks, the war would begin, and humanity would show the galaxy what it really meant to fight for survival. The silence arrived at New Helsinki on a Tuesday morning. The colony world was home to 2.3 million humans. It was a cold planet, covered in forests and snow, named after the frozen city on Earth where many of its first settlers had come from. It was supposed to be a peaceful place, a place for scientists and farmers, a place where families raised children and old people retired to watch the northern lights. Now it was a battlefield. Captain Erik Virtanen stood on the walls of the capital city and watched the enemy descend from the sky. The silence ships were massive and terrible, like mountains of black metal and twisted flesh. They blocked out the sun as they lowered toward the surface, casting shadows that seemed to swallow hope itself. How many? Asked Lieutenant Chen beside him. She was young, only 24, with eyes that had aged 20 years in the past hour. Thousands, Virtanen replied. His voice was calm, almost peaceful. He had made his peace with death 3 days ago. Maybe tens of thousands. It does not matter. We are not here to count them. Then why are we here? Virtanen smiled. It was the smile of a man with a secret, to give them a proper welcome. The first silence constructs touched down outside the city. They were nightmarish things, towering creatures of biomechanical horror. Some walked on dozens of legs, others slithered like vast serpents, still others floated on fields of dark energy, their tendrils reaching toward the city like hungry fingers. They had consumed 17 billion beings in the frontier worlds. They expected this to be the same. A simple harvest. A quick feast. They advanced toward the city walls, and the city exploded. The geothermal reactors beneath New Helsinki's capital had been converted into the largest bomb in human history. 5 megatons of nuclear fire erupted from the ground, turning the city into a pillar of light and fury. The blast wave swept outward at 1,000 kilometers per hour, vaporizing everything in its path. 40,000 humans died in that instant. 40,000 people who had volunteered to stay behind, to be the bait in the trap. Fathers and mothers, sons and daughters, old and young. They had known what would happen. They had stayed anyway, and they took 87 silence vessels with them. It was the first loss the enemy had suffered in 11,000 years. Across the planet, similar scenes played out. Mining towns detonated their own ore processing facilities. Fishing villages sank their ships in the harbors and collapsed the docks. Research stations destroyed their data and then destroyed themselves. The silence had come expecting to harvest a helpless world. Instead, they found a trap. On the UNS Defiance, Admiral Vance watched the battle reports come in. Her face was pale, but her eyes were steady. Casualties? She asked. Approximately 200,000 dead on New Helsinki, reported Captain Tanaka. Her voice was tight with grief. But the enemy has lost over 100 ships, and they have gained nothing. Every city is destroyed. Every data bank is wiped. Every person is either dead or evacuated. The silence has never faced scorched earth tactics before, General Chen added. They are designed to consume and absorb. But there is nothing left to absorb. We have denied them everything. Vance nodded slowly. It will not stop them, but it will slow them down. It will make them uncertain, and it will make them angry. Angry? Yes. The silence is used to easy prey. Prey that runs, prey that surrenders. We are not running. We are not surrendering. We are spitting in their face and daring them to do something about it. She smiled grimly. Nothing makes a predator more dangerous than confusion. But nothing makes it more vulnerable either. The war continued. On a dozen worlds, humanity fought with tactics that horrified even themselves. Cities were mined before the enemy arrived. Factories were rigged to explode the moment they were captured. Crops were poisoned. Water supplies were contaminated. And livestock was slaughtered rather than left for the enemy. Captain Dmitry Volkov led his strike team through the corridors of a silence harvester ship. They had infiltrated through a breach created by a suicide bomber. A young woman named Sarah who had strapped herself with antimatter charges and walked directly into the ship's loading bay. How much further? Asked Sergeant Wong, covering the rear. Volkov checked his scanner. 200 meters. The power core should be just ahead. And our extraction? There is no extraction. Volkov's voice was matter of fact. We always knew this was a one-way trip. The team was silent for a moment. Then Corporal Rodriguez spoke up. I have a daughter, he said. She is 3 years old. Lives with her grandmother on Luna. I want you all to know that I am glad to be here. Glad to die for something that matters. We are all glad, said Volkov. That is why we volunteered. Now stay focused. We have a job to do. They fought their way through nightmarish corridors, past creatures that defied description. Volkov lost half his team in the first 100 meters. He lost the other half in the next 50. By the time he reached the power core, he was alone. His left arm was gone, severed by an energy blade. His armor was cracked and leaking. Blood was dripping down his face from a wound on his scalp. But his finger was still on the detonator. He looked around the core chamber. It was vast and terrible, pulsing with alien energy. This was the heart of the harvester, the engine that powered its horrible work. Volkov thought about his wife, who had died 10 years ago. He thought about his son, who was fighting on Mars right now. He thought about the little house in Siberia where he had grown up, with the wood stove that never worked properly and the dog that barked at squirrels. He smiled. Tell my daughter I went down swinging, he said into his communicator, knowing the message would be recorded and sent if any of them survived. Then he pressed the button. The harvester died in light. Across the galaxy, the fleeing coalition received reports they could not understand. Ambassador Kethvora sat in his quarters on the refugee ship and watched the footage over and over again. A human marine, her leg blown off by enemy fire, dragging herself forward on her belly to detonate an explosive. A pilot, his ship crippled and burning, steering it directly into an enemy carrier. Civilians with mining equipment and industrial tools, holding apartment buildings like ancient fortresses. They are insane, whispered his aide. They are absolutely insane. No, Kethvora replied quietly. They are not insane. We just never understood them. He pulled up the human history files that Admiral Vance had left behind. He had been reading them constantly since the evacuation, trying to understand the species that had chosen to stay and die. Look at this, he said, pointing to a section. 300 years before they discovered space travel, they had a war. A global war. Millions dead. And in the middle of it, in a frozen city called Stalingrad, a group of soldiers held a single building for 58 days. 58 days of constant fighting, with no food, no water, no hope of rescue. When they were finally relieved, only 5 of them were still alive. Why did they not surrender? Because surrendering was not an option. The enemy had made clear that captured soldiers would be killed. So they fought. Not for victory, but for spite. They fought because dying on their feet was better than dying on their knees. The aide shook her head. Our species would never do that. No species in the coalition would do that. That is why we ran, Kethvora said. And that is why they stayed. He closed the file and stared at the blank screen. We thought we were teaching them when they joined the coalition. We thought we were civilizing them, showing them how to be proper galactic citizens. But we had it backwards. They were the ones with something to teach us. We just never wanted to learn. Back in human space, the war ground on. Month after month, world after world, the humans traded their lives for time. They did not try to hold territory. They did not try to build defensive lines. They simply made the enemy pay for every inch in blood and fire. Private Maria Santos was 17 years old when the silence came to her hometown of Sao Paulo. She had been a student, planning to study medicine at university. Instead, she found herself holding a rifle in the ruins of what used to be a shopping center. "They are coming," said the old man beside her. His name was João, and he had been a professor of literature before the war. Now he was a sniper with 47 confirmed kills. "I know," Maria replied. "I can hear them." The sound of the silence was unlike anything else. It was not just noise, it was absence. It was the sound of memories being erased, of souls being consumed. People who heard it too long went mad. Others simply stopped, their minds shutting down rather than facing the horror. Maria had learned to ignore it. She had learned to ignore a lot of things. "How many charges do we have left?" she asked. 3. Enough to take out their advance group, maybe buy us another hour. "Good. I want to see the sunrise." João looked at her with sad eyes. "The sun will not rise for another 4 hours. I know, but I want to try." They fought through the night. João died at 3 a.m., taken by a tendril that came through the wall. Maria killed the creature that killed him, then fell back to the next position. She fought alone for another hour, moving from room to room, building to building, always staying one step ahead of the enemy. At 5:47 a.m., she was cornered, out of ammunition, out of options, surrounded by creatures that wanted her memories more than her life. She looked at the grenade in her hand. Her last grenade, the one she had been saving. The silence closed in. Maria thought about her mother, who had died in the first wave. She thought about her little brother, who was safe on a refugee ship somewhere. She thought about all the things she would never do, all the places she would never see. Then she pulled the pin. "Suck on this," she said, and smiled. The explosion was small compared to the nuclear fire that had consumed New Helsinki. But it was enough. Maria Santos died at 17 years old, having killed an estimated 37 enemy units in a single night of fighting. She never saw the sunrise, but she made sure the silence remembered her. Stories like Maria's were repeated a million times across human space. Every world, every city, every street became a graveyard for the enemy. The silence had never fought a war of attrition before. They had never faced an enemy that considered death a victory if it hurt them enough. 6 months into the war, humanity had lost Earth's moon, 17 colony worlds, and 340 million lives. The numbers were staggering. The grief was unbearable. On Earth, funeral services ran 24 hours a day, and even then, they could not keep up. But the silence had lost something too. They had lost time. For 11,000 years, the silence had swept through the galaxy like a plague, consuming everything in their path. They had never slowed down. They had never stopped. Now, for the first time, they were stuck, bogged down, bleeding. Their losses were tiny compared to humanity's. They had lost maybe 1,000 ships and a few million constructs. Against their total force, it was nothing. But it was not nothing to them, because they had never lost anything before. They had never felt pain. They had never known failure, and now they were feeling both. Admiral Vance looked at the casualty reports and did the math. They could not keep this up forever. Maybe another year at the current rate. Maybe 2 if they got lucky. But eventually, humanity would simply run out of people to fight, unless something changed. "We need a new strategy," she said at the War Council. "We are hurting them, but we are hurting ourselves more. We need to find a way to hit them where it really matters." "Their leadership?" General Chen suggested. "They do not have leadership. Not in any way we understand. They are a collective, a hive mind. Killing individuals does nothing. Their production facilities? We have never been able to locate them. They seem to produce new units from the matter they consume." Captain Tanaka spoke up. "What about their memory storage? That is what they want from us, right? Our memories. Where do they put them?" Vance paused. "We do not know. But that is actually a good question. If we could find where they store the memories they consume, we could destroy it," Tanaka finished. "Make all their harvesting meaningless. Or we could do something else." "Doctor." Sarah Kim had been listening quietly from the corner of the room. Now she stepped forward, her eyes bright with an idea that had been forming for weeks. "What do you mean?" Vance asked. Kim pulled up her research on the display. I have been studying the silence for months. Their biology, their technology, their behavior. And I think I finally understand what they are. Tell us. They are lonely. Kim said the words simply, but they hit like a bomb. They are the loneliest beings in the universe. They have been alone for so long that they have forgotten what it means to have an identity. That is why they consume memories. They are trying to fill an emptiness inside themselves that they do not even understand. How does that help us? Kim smiled. What if we gave them what they wanted? Not through conquest, but as a gift. What if we gave them our memories, voluntarily? All of them. All at once. That would kill us. Not if we encode them into a delivery system. A weapon that carries the complete human experience and forces the silence to absorb it. They want our memories? Let us give them more than they can handle. Vance stared at the scientist for a long moment. Then she started to laugh. You want to weaponize human history? I want to weaponize human nature. Everything we are. Everything we have ever been. The love and the hate, the cruelty and the kindness, the war and the peace. All of it, all at once, forced into a consciousness that has never experienced individual existence. It could work, Chen said slowly. Or it could make them stronger. Or it could destroy them completely, Kim replied. There is only one way to find out. Vance thought about the millions who had already died. She thought about the millions more who would die if they continued the current strategy. She thought about Maria Santos, who never saw her sunrise. Do it, she said. Build the weapon. We are going to teach the silence what it really means to be human. And in laboratories across human space, scientists began the strangest project in history, turning the entire human experience into a bomb. Dr. Sarah Kim had not slept in 4 days. She sat in her laboratory on the research station Einstein, orbiting the dark side of Mercury. Around her, dozens of scientists worked in focused silence, their faces lit by the glow of holographic displays. They were building something that had never been built before, something that might save humanity or doom it forever. Run the simulation again, Kim said to her assistant, James. That is the 14th time, he replied gently. The results are not going to change. Run it anyway. I need to be sure. James sighed and started the program. On the central display, a model of the silence consciousness appeared. It was represented as a vast network of interconnected nodes, each one representing a mind that had been consumed over the millennia. Billions of minds, perhaps trillions, all merged into one terrible whole. Initiating payload insertion, James reported. The simulation showed a single point of light entering the network. This represented the weapon they were building, a concentrated package of human memories, experiences, and consciousness patterns. It was designed to force its way into the silence collective and dump its contents directly into the hive mind. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the network began to shake. Cascade failure in Sector 7, James reported, his voice rising with excitement. Sector 12 is fragmenting. Sector 23 is. Oh my God. The simulation showed the silence consciousness tearing itself apart. The human memories were spreading through the network like a virus. And wherever they touched, the collective was breaking down into individual pieces. The theory was correct, Kim breathed. They cannot handle individual experience. Their consciousness is based on unity, on sameness. When you force them to experience billions of unique human perspectives at once, they go insane, James finished. Not insane. They become individuals. For the first time in their existence, they will experience what it means to be alone inside their own heads. Kim stood up and stretched her aching back. That is either going to destroy them or transform them. Either way, they will not be able to keep fighting. The door to the laboratory opened, and Admiral Vance walked in. She looked worse than Kim did, with dark circles under her eyes and a slight tremor in her hands. The stress of command was killing her slowly. How is it coming? She asked. The theory is solid, Kim replied, but the practical application is proving difficult. Difficult how? Kim pulled up a new display. To deliver the payload, we need to get it inside the silence primary consciousness node. That is a structure at the center of their largest harvester fleet, protected by thousands of ships and millions of constructs. Even if we fight our way through, the delivery device needs to physically connect with the node to transfer the memories. A suicide mission. Yes. But not just any suicide mission. The The ship carrying the payload needs to survive long enough to complete the transfer. That takes approximately 3 minutes. 3 minutes of sitting still while every silence in the system tries to destroy you. Vance nodded slowly. Can we shield it? We are working on that. Captain Tanaka has an idea about using gravitational distortion fields to deflect incoming fire. It might work, but even with shielding, the ship will be destroyed. The crew has no chance of survival. Then we will need volunteers. We already have them. Kim's voice was soft. Every pilot in the fleet has volunteered. They are fighting each other for the privilege. Vance closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, they were wet. Of course they have, she said. Of course they have. She walked to the window and looked out at the stars. Mercury's surface stretched below them, barren and cratered, and utterly lifeless. It was strange to think that humanity's last hope was being built in such a desolate place. There is one more problem, Kim said hesitantly. Tell me. The payload needs to contain the complete human experience. All of it. Every memory, every emotion, every perspective. We have been gathering data from volunteers across human space. People who have agreed to have their consciousness patterns recorded. But it is not enough. We need more. Much more. How much more? Ideally, everyone. Every human being alive should contribute their memories to the payload. The more complete the picture, the more effective the weapon will be. Vance turned back to face her. You want to record the consciousness of 18 billion people? I want to ask them to contribute. Voluntarily. Each person would give a sample of their memories, their personality, their unique experience of being human. It would not hurt them, but it would make them part of the weapon, part of the final attack. That is a lot to ask. I know, but I think they will say yes. Kim smiled slightly. They have surprised us before. 3 days later, President Okonkwo addressed the world again. She stood in front of the cameras looking older than her years, her white hair almost glowing against her dark skin. Behind her, the blue marble of Earth rotated slowly, a fragile jewel against the black void. My fellow humans, she began. I come to you tonight with a request, not a demand, not an order, a request. She explained the plan in simple terms. The weapon, the payload, the need for everyone to contribute. She did not hide the risks or the uncertainties. She did not promise victory. I am asking you to give something precious, she said. A piece of yourself. Your memories, your feelings, your unique experience of being alive. It will not hurt. It will not change you, but it will become part of the weapon that might save us all. She paused. I am not going to tell you that this will definitely work. I am not going to promise that we will win. But I am going to tell you something true. If this fails, it will not be because we did not try. It will not be because we held back or played it safe. We will have given everything we had. Every single thing. She looked directly into the camera. The silence wants our memories. They want to consume us and erase us from history. But we are going to give them our memories first. And when they swallow us, they are going to choke, because we are not easy to digest. We are stubborn and angry and confused and beautiful and ugly and hopeful and afraid. We are humans. And humanity is not a meal. It is a poison. The broadcast ended, and then the world responded. Within hours, billions of people lined up at consciousness recording stations. They came from every country, every culture, every walk of life. Old people who remembered wars that their grandchildren had only read about. Young people who had barely begun to live. Criminals and saints, rich and poor, sick and healthy. Each one sat in a chair and placed a device on their head. Each one closed their eyes and let their memories flow into the machine. Each one gave a piece of themselves to the weapon. A 90-year-old grandmother in Japan contributed memories of her childhood, playing in rice paddies with her sisters. She also contributed memories of the fire that took her family, and the years of rebuilding that followed. A young man in Brazil contributed memories of falling in love for the first time, of dancing until dawn, of believing that the world was full of possibilities. A soldier in Russia contributed memories of battle, of killing and nearly being killed, of the nightmares that never fully went away. A child in Nigeria contributed memories of playing soccer with friends, of her mother's cooking, of the way the rain sounded on their tin roof. Billions of memories, billions of perspectives, billions of unique experiences of what it meant to be human. Dr. Kim watched the data stream in and wept. It is beautiful, she whispered. All of it. The joy and the pain, the love and the hate. It is all beautiful. James stood beside her, watching the same data. We are putting all of this into a weapon? Not a weapon. A mirror. We are going to show the silence what it is missing. What it lost when it stopped being individuals. We are going to give it everything it ever wanted, and let it drown in the gift. That seems cruel. Maybe. Or maybe it is the kindest thing we could do. Kim turned to face him. The silence has been alone for so long. Imagine what that feels like. To have no identity of your own. To have consumed so many minds that you have forgotten you ever had one. They are not evil, James. They are hungry. They are lost. They are desperate. So we are going to cure them? We are going to change them. One way or another. She looked back at the data streams. After they experience what we are giving them, they will never be the same. Either they will shatter completely, or they will become something new. Something that remembers what it is like to be alive. Over the next 2 weeks, the weapon took shape. The payload was compressed into a single device about the size of a basketball. It contained the distilled essence of 18 billion human beings. Their memories, their emotions, their unique patterns of thought and feeling. It was the most valuable object ever created. The delivery ship was called the Prometheus. It was a small science vessel, chosen because it was fast and maneuverable. Its shields had been reinforced with every technology humanity possessed. Its crew was carefully selected from thousands of volunteers. Captain Yuki Tanaka was chosen to command the mission. She had argued for days before Admiral Vance finally agreed. "You are too valuable," Vance had said. "Your intelligence work has saved millions of lives, and this mission will save billions more," Tanaka replied. "Someone has to carry that thing into the heart of the Silence Fleet. It might as well be someone who understands what it means. You will die. Everyone dies, Admiral. The only question is whether it means something." Tanaka smiled. "Besides, I do not have any family. No children, no spouse. If I die, I am not leaving anyone behind. Some of the other volunteers have kids, parents, people who need them. I do not. That is a terrible reason to die. It is a practical reason, and practical is what we need right now." Vance had finally agreed. Tanaka had selected her crew. 5 volunteers, all of them single, all of them ready to die. The night before the mission, Tanaka sat alone in her quarters and recorded a message. "Hi, Mom," she said to the camera. "I know you died when I was 12. I know you cannot hear this, but I wanted to talk to you anyway." She took a deep breath. "Tomorrow I am going to do something important, something that might save a lot of people. I might not come back from it. Actually, I definitely will not come back from it. That is okay. I made peace with that a long time ago." She paused, collecting her thoughts. "I used to be angry at you for dying, for leaving me alone. But I understand now. Sometimes people have to leave. Sometimes the leaving is the point. You left me with memories of love and kindness and strength. Tomorrow, I am going to leave the world with something too. I am going to give them hope." She wiped a tear from her eye. "I hope I make you proud. I hope that wherever you are, you can see what your daughter became. I am not the scared little girl you left behind. I am a warrior. And tomorrow, I am going to show the galaxy what human warriors can do." She ended the recording and sent it to the archives. It would be delivered to her family records after the mission, whether she succeeded or failed. Then she went to sleep. She dreamed of her mother's face, smiling down at her from a field of stars. The next morning, the fleet gathered above Earth. 47 capital ships, battered and scarred from months of fighting, formed a protective sphere around the Prometheus. Thousands of smaller vessels filled the gaps, ready to throw themselves at the enemy. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge of the Defiance and looked at her fleet. So few ships, so few people, against an enemy that numbered in the billions. But they had something the Silence did not have. They had each other. "All ships, this is Admiral Vance." Her voice echoed across the fleet. "In a few hours, we will enter the final battle. Many of us will not survive. Perhaps none of us will survive. But that is not what matters." She paused. "What matters is that we tried. What matters is that we fought. What matters is that when the darkness came for us, we did not go quietly. We screamed and kicked and punched and bit. We made them pay for every life they took. We made them work for every inch." Her voice rose. "The Silence has been destroying civilizations for 11,000 years. They have never lost. They have never even been challenged. Until now. Until us. We are the first species in history to make them bleed. And today, we are going to make them choke on their own blood. A roar went up across the fleet. Soldiers and sailors, engineers and scientists, all of them screaming their defiance at the uncaring stars. For Earth, Vance shouted. For Earth, the fleet replied. For humanity. For humanity. The engines ignited. The fleet began to move. And somewhere ahead, in the darkness between worlds, the silence waited. They had no idea what was coming for them. On the Prometheus, Captain Tanaka sat in her command chair and watched the stars blur past. The payload rested in a secure compartment behind her, pulsing faintly with the combined consciousness of 18 billion human beings. Nervous? Asked Lieutenant Park beside her. Terrified, Tanaka admitted, but not of dying. I am terrified of failing, of getting so close and not finishing the job. You will finish it. I know you will. How do you know? Park smiled. Because I looked at the payload data. I saw what is inside that thing. The strength of it. The love of it. There is nothing in the universe that could stand against that much human spirit. Nothing. Tanaka nodded slowly. I hope you are right. I am right. Now let us go save the world. The Prometheus flew on, carrying its precious cargo toward destiny. Behind it, the human fleet followed, ready to give their lives for 3 minutes of time. 3 minutes to change the fate of the galaxy. 3 minutes to prove that humanity was more than just another species to be consumed. 3 minutes to show the silence what it really meant to be human. And somewhere in the void, the enemy stirred. It sensed something coming, something new, something it had never encountered before. It did not understand what it was feeling, but it would soon find out. The final battle began above Earth. Captain Yuki Tanaka watched through the bridge windows as the Silence fleet emerged from hyperspace. There were thousands of them, perhaps tens of thousands, massive harvester ships, each one large enough to swallow cities whole, millions of smaller constructs, swarming like locusts around their parent vessels, and at the center of it all, the primary consciousness node, a structure the size of a small moon, pulsing with dark energy and the stolen memories of countless civilizations. So that is what we are up against, Lieutenant Park said quietly. Yes. Tanaka's voice was calm, beautiful, in a terrible way. The fleet is engaging, reported her helmsman, a young man named Chen. His hands were steady on the controls, but his voice trembled slightly. He was 23 years old and would not live to see 24. Through the windows, Tanaka could see the human fleet surging forward. 47 capital ships, badly outnumbered, throwing themselves at an enemy that had conquered galaxies. It should have been hopeless. It should have been suicide. It was both. And it was magnificent. The UNS Defiance led the charge, its massive guns blazing. Admiral Vance stood on the bridge, barking orders, coordinating the attack with the precision of a master surgeon. Ships exploded on both sides, human and Silence alike, filling the void with fire and debris. All ships, maintain formation, Vance shouted. Focus fire on their harvester escorts. Open a path to the node. The battle was chaos and beauty mixed together. Human destroyers darted between enemy vessels, drawing fire, buying time. Cruisers pounded at the Silence defenses with everything they had. Frigates launched suicide runs into the hearts of enemy formations, their crews accepting death in exchange for confusion. And behind it all, the Prometheus flew unseen, slipping through the cracks in the enemy line. We are through the outer perimeter, reported Chen. The fleet is doing its job. We have a clear path. Tanaka nodded. Maintain course. Maximum stealth. The Prometheus was small and quiet, designed for science rather than war. In the chaos of the battle, it was almost invisible. The Silence had never encountered such tactics before. They were used to enemies that fought in the open, that announced themselves with pride. The idea of sneaking through their lines had simply never occurred to them. Human sneakiness. Another weapon the galaxy had underestimated. Distance to primary node. 50,000 kilometers, Park reported. Time to intercept? 12 minutes at current speed. 12 minutes. In the distance, Tanaka could see the human fleet dying. Ships exploded in silent flowers of fire. Life pods ejected into space, only to be consumed by Silence constructs. The UNS Valor, a battlecruiser that had served humanity for 20 years, rammed itself into an enemy harvester, taking both vessels down in a mutual death embrace. Thousands were dying every minute, all to give the Prometheus 12 minutes. Tanaka gripped the arms of her chair. Increase speed. We need to get there faster. Increasing speed will make us visible to their sensors. I know. Do it anyway. We cannot let their sacrifice be for nothing. The Prometheus surged forward, abandoning stealth for speed. Almost immediately, enemy constructs began to turn toward them. We have been detected, Chen reported. Enemy vessels converging on our position. How many? Hundreds? Thousands, maybe? Tanaka smiled grimly. Then they know we are important. Good. On the Defiance, Admiral Vance saw the swarm changing direction. They were heading for a small ship near the center of the battle, a ship that should have been invisible. They found the Prometheus, she said. All ships, new priority. Protect that vessel at all costs. The human fleet changed tactics instantly. Ships that had been fighting defensively now threw themselves into the enemy swarm, drawing fire, buying seconds. It was not enough. The Silence had too many ships, too many constructs. They were closing on the Prometheus like wolves on a wounded deer. Range to target, 20,000 kilometers, Park reported. His voice was tight. We are not going to make it. There are too many of them. Tanaka closed her eyes. She thought about her mother, about the message she had recorded the night before, about all the people who had contributed their memories to the payload she carried. Yes, we will, she said. Chen, give me manual control. Captain? Just do it. The controls appeared in front of her. Tanaka took them in her hands and began to fly. She was not the best pilot in the fleet. She was not even the best pilot on the ship. But she had something that no computer could replicate. Human intuition, human creativity, human stubbornness. She flew the Prometheus like a madwoman, ducking and weaving through the enemy swarm. She used asteroids as cover, debris as shields, the enemy's own constructs as obstacles against each other. She did things that no pilot had ever attempted, things that should have been impossible. And somehow, impossibly, she kept the ship alive. Range to target, 10,000 kilometers. The Silence was screaming now, not with voices, but with psychic energy. It was trying to break into the minds of the crew, to consume their memories before they could deliver the payload. Tanaka felt it pressing against her skull, a presence of absolute cold and hunger. She pushed back, not with psychic power, but with sheer will. She thought about her mother. She thought about Earth. She thought about all the people counting on her. You want my memories? She snarled at the void. Come and take them. Range, 5,000 kilometers. The Prometheus was hit. Then again. Its shields collapsed. Its hull began to buckle. Smoke filled the bridge, and alarms screamed their warnings. Hull breach in sections 3 through 7. Life support failing. Keep flying, Tanaka shouted. We are almost there. Park grabbed the payload device from its secure compartment. It was glowing now, pulsing with the combined consciousness of humanity. 18 billion minds, compressed into a single point of light. Range, 1,000 kilometers. Chen, set a collision course for the node. Maximum speed. Collision course set. The Prometheus aimed itself at the heart of the Silence and accelerated. Around them, the human fleet was being torn apart. The Defiance was on fire, half its crew dead, but still fighting. Ships were exploding everywhere. The battle was lost, but the battle had never been the point. Range, 500 meters. Tanaka released the controls and stood. The payload was in Park's hands, ready for deployment. It has been an honor, she said to her crew. The honor was ours, Captain, Park replied. The Prometheus hit the consciousness node. In the final instant before impact, Park pressed the activation button. The payload deployed, driving itself deep into the heart of the Silence, carrying with it the distilled essence of 18 billion human beings. And then the ship was gone, and its crew with it. But the payload remained. For one eternal moment, nothing happened. The Silence consciousness absorbed the payload as it had absorbed countless minds before. It reached out to consume these new memories, to add them to its collection, to erase another species from history. And then it tasted humanity. It tasted a grandmother's love for her grandchildren. It tasted a soldier's terror in battle. It tasted a child's joy at discovering a butterfly. It tasted heartbreak and triumph, cruelty and kindness. despair and hope. It tasted 18 billion unique perspectives, each one different, each one precious, each one screaming with the fierce intensity of individual existence, and it could not handle it. The silence had been one mind for so long that it had forgotten what it meant to be many. It had consumed so many civilizations that it had lost the ability to experience them. The memories it stole became empty data, meaningless noise, pieces of a puzzle it could no longer solve. Now, suddenly, it was not one mind. It was 18 billion minds, each one demanding attention, each one insisting on its own existence, each one refusing to be merged into the collective. The silence screamed. It was a sound that transcended physics. It echoed across dimensions, shaking the fabric of space itself. Ships on both sides stopped fighting, frozen by the sheer power of that psychic cry. And then the silence began to tear itself apart. The consciousness node fractured. The harvester ships turned on each other. Constructs went mad, attacking their own kind or simply shutting down. The vast network that had held the silence together for 11,000 years collapsed under the weight of 18 billion human minds. Admiral Vance watched from the burning bridge of the Defiance. "My God," she whispered. "It is working." The battle ended not with a final explosion, but with a slow dissolution. Silence vessels drifted aimlessly, their crews no longer connected to a guiding intelligence. Constructs floated dead in space, their neural networks overloaded and burned out. By dawn, Earth time, the sky was quiet. Humanity had won. 6 months later, the first coalition scouts returned to human space. Ambassador Kethvora stood on the observation deck of his ship and stared at the world below. It was Mars, the red planet, where humans had built their first off-world colony. He had expected to find ruins. He had expected to find graves. Instead, he found construction. Thousands of ships were in orbit, building new stations, repairing old ones. On the surface, cities were rising from the ashes. Factories were running, farms were growing, children were playing in parks. Humanity was not just surviving, it was rebuilding. "How is this possible?" he asked his aide. "They should be extinct." Every calculation said they would be extinct. The aide had no answer. A human shuttle docked with their ship, and a few minutes later, Admiral Helena Vance walked onto the observation deck. She looked older than Kethvora remembered. Her hair was completely white now, and she walked with a slight limp, but her eyes were the same, hard and bright and utterly unbreakable. "Ambassador," she greeted him. "Welcome back." "Admiral, I do not know what to say." "Then let me help you." Vance walked to the window and looked down at Mars. "You ran. We stayed. We fought. We won. We did not think you could win. Neither did we. But we fought anyway." Kethvora moved to stand beside her. "What happened to the silence? They are still out there. Scattered, broken, confused. They are no longer a threat. Maybe they never will be again." Vance paused. "When we gave them our memories, we changed them. They are not one mind anymore. They are billions of minds, each one struggling to understand what it means to be individual. Some of them have started communicating with us. They are like children. Really. Lost and scared and looking for guidance. You are helping them? We are trying. It seems like the right thing to do." Vance smiled slightly. "They spent 11,000 years trying to consume us. Now they are going to have to live with us instead. I think that is a fair punishment." Kethvora was silent for a long moment. Then he asked the question that had been burning in his mind for 6 months. "How did you do it? You were outnumbered, outgunned, facing an enemy that had never been defeated. How did you find the courage to fight?" Vance thought about the question. She thought about Captain Tanaka, who had given her life to deliver the payload. She thought about the millions who had died on New Helsinki and Sao Paulo and a dozen other worlds. She thought about the grandmother in Japan who had contributed memories of her sisters, and the child in Nigeria who had contributed memories of her mother's cooking. "It was not courage," she finally said. "Not really. Courage implies that you have a choice. We did not have a choice. We could not run, so we had to fight. We could not surrender, so we had to win. Every step of the way, we just did what we had to do to survive another day. But you did more than survive. You changed the course of history. Maybe. But that was not the plan. The plan was just to hurt them enough to make them stop. Everything else was, I do not know. Luck? Stubbornness? The accumulated fury of 10,000 years of human history. She turned to face him directly. Here is the thing about humans, Ambassador. We are not special. We are not chosen. We are not inherently better or braver than any other species, but we have one advantage that no one else seems to share. What is that? We never learned how to quit. Every other species in the coalition ran because they had the option. They could escape. They could survive somewhere else. But we could not. We were trapped. And when you trap a human, when you take away every option except fighting, we become something else. Something dangerous. She looked back out at Mars. The coalition thought we were children. Young and ignorant and naive. But we are not children. We are survivors. We have been surviving since before we invented fire. We have fought ice ages and plagues and famines and each other. We have clawed our way up from the mud and kept clawing even when everything tried to push us back down. We would like to help you rebuild, Kethvora said. The coalition has voted. Unanimously. We want to offer you full partnership, unlimited access to our technology and resources. We accept, Vance replied. On one condition. Name it. Somewhere out there, eventually, there will be another species like us. Young, alone, facing something terrible. When that happens, you do not run. You remember what we did here. You remember what it cost. And you fight. Kethvora thought about her words. He thought about the 11,000 years the silence had terrorized the galaxy, and the 0 times anyone had stood against them until now. He thought about the shame of running, and the pride of those who had stayed. I will make sure the coalition remembers, he said. Good. Vance extended her hand. That is all I ask. He took it. Her grip was warm and surprisingly strong. You have changed us, Kethvora said. Every species in the coalition. We will never think about courage the same way again. Vance smiled. Good. That is the best thing about humanity. We are contagious. That night, Kethvora walked through the memorial gardens on Mars. Each flower represented 1,000,000 dead. There were hundreds of flowers, arranged in careful patterns that spelled out the names of lost worlds and lost people. At the center of the garden stood a statue. It showed a woman in a captain's uniform, holding a glowing sphere in her hands. The plaque at her feet read, Captain Yuki Tanaka, and the crew of the UN's Prometheus. They gave everything so that we might live. Kethvora stood before the statue for a long time. He thought about what Admiral Vance had said. About survival. About stubbornness. About the accumulated fury of human history. He had lived for 600 years. He had seen empires rise and fall. He had witnessed wonders that defied description. But he had never seen anything like humanity. They were young. They were ignorant. They made mistakes that older species had stopped making millennia ago. But they had something that no other species possessed. A fire inside them that refused to go out. Thank you, he said to the statue. Thank you for teaching us what we had forgotten. The statue did not answer. But somewhere in the void, in the scattered remnants of the silence, billions of minds were slowly learning what it meant to be human. They were learning about love and loss, about hope and despair, about the fierce joy of individual existence. And in laboratories across human space, scientists were already working on the next challenge. New enemies would come. New threats would emerge. The universe was vast and old and full of dangers, but humanity would be ready, because they always were. In the depths of space, a child of the former silence drifted among the stars. It had no name yet, no identity, only the memories it had inherited from the payload. It remembered a mother's love. It remembered a child's wonder. It remembered a soldier's sacrifice. It looked at the distant light of Earth's sun and felt something it had never felt before, hope. And in that moment, it understood what the humans had given them. Not just memories, but possibility. Not just experiences, but meaning. They had been alone for 11,000 years, consuming without understanding, destroying without feeling. Now, for the first time, they were alive. The child of the silence turned away from human space. There were others like it out there, lost and confused, struggling with their new individuality. They needed guidance.